Okay, so can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so today we'll be covering two topics: listening skills and the conversation. So, do you have any question pertaining to the other two topics that we covered in the first session? Vous avez des questions? Okay, so I'll take this as a no. And thank you for being here today. And I apologize for last Saturday for not being able to conduct the class. Et merci pour avoir, well, you've decided for today, and luckily we'll be able to conduct our second session. So, what is listening? So, according to you, why do you think listening skills is an important component of counseling? Anyone?
Ma'am, it's to have a better and
Yes.
it is to have a better understanding of the problem or what are we dealing with, something like that.
Yes. Yes, so listening skill, it's a very important skill because the whole counseling relationship and the whole process is based on the amount of time and that you give to your client and information that you retrieve by listening to your client. So, what is listening? Listening is defined as the ability to pay attention to and effectively interpret what other people are saying. So, have you heard well, do you know the difference between listening and hearing? Anyone? What is the difference between listening and hearing? No one?
Ma'am,
Yes.
okay, I think maybe listening means like to pay attention, to focus on something,
Yeah.
I think.
Yes. Yes,
And
and hearing.
hearing is like maybe just to hear something, just to not focus on it, to not pay too much attention.
Exactly. So the main component between listening and hearing is consideration, to pay attention and give consideration to what you are hearing. So according to Merriam-Webster, hearing is defined as the process, function, or power of perceiving sounds, specifically the special sense by which noises and tones are received as stimuli. Listening, however, is defined as to hear something with thoughtful attention and give consideration. I don't know if you've heard the saying arrête écouter commence tendez. Non, sorry, arrête tendez commence écouter. Have you ever heard about this saying? Okay, maybe not. So, when you are listening to someone, you are paying attention to whatever is being said. You are giving full consideration to whatever you are hearing, and you are able to respond to whatever you've heard, and you're able to give feedback to any conversation which is happening around you. Hearing, however, is hearing all the different noises in the background without paying much attention to it and without registering whatever is being said. So it is important. Why are we focusing on the difference between listening and hearing? Because sometimes when you are tired in a counseling session, it may happen that you start hearing instead of listening, but you are ask as a counselor, it is expected from you to practice listening throughout the counseling session, because if you start practicing hearing, you will not be able to pay attention to whatever your client is telling you, and you won't be able to properly guide your client about any situation or problem that they might be facing. So listening is what you should be practicing in a counseling session, and in any not just for counseling, but even the class, you should be listening instead of hearing, and you should pay attention to whatever is being said to you. So if you are having a conversation about a certain topic, and if it is something which is of interest to you, it's better that you practice listening instead of hearing. So, listening, the different components of listening is that you pay attention to whatever is being said, you analyze the sound heard, you try to find meaning to the sound that you've heard, and you react to the sound. However, when you are hearing, you just hear the sound and you do not pay any attention, or you do not analyze the sound or react to it. So, in counseling, one of the main skills which is required from you as a counselor is for you to practice active listening. So, active listening occurs when the counselor listens to find a meaning and respond accordingly to whatever is being said. And the counselor says very little but show acceptance, genuineness, and empathy. So, by showing acceptance, genuineness, and empathy, you are showing to your client that you are practicing empathic listening. That is, you're able to, by listening to them, you're able to put yourself in their shoes and understand their problem from their point of view. So, empathic listening is another important skills that you should have as a counselor. So, according to the report of the Center for Public Mental Health from Cape Town, empathic listening involves the following key point: listening has to be active. There has to be verbal and non-verbal components to listening. Listening uses more than one sense. It does not involve hearing with the ears only, but it also involves using the eyes to observe or saying things at appropriate interval. Listening is also conveying what have been heard and understood. Now there are main qualities which is required from you as a good listener and a good counselor. So according to the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, the BACP, you will see that the BACP is well, a word that you'll find across your manual, because we always make reference to this association, and the main qualities that they argued a good listener needs to have is firstly empathy. So, can anyone amongst you tell me what is empathy? Anyone?
It is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others.
Exactly. It's yes, empathy is the ability to put yourself in that person's shoes and understand their point of view and their situation from their point of view. And sincerity. Anyone? Sincerity?
To be honest.
To be honest, exactly. So, sincerity is usually associated with genuineness, and it means that you show the person who you really are, and do not try to create an image for yourself in front of that person when you're not that person. Well, create a certain image, a perfect image of yourself in front of that person. So you have to be sincere in your dealings. You have to be sincere with your client, and sincere whenever you're having a conversation with your client, because for the client to open up, he or she needs to trust you. And if there isn't this trust in the counseling relationship, they will be reluctant to open up about any issues that they might be facing. So genuineness and sincerity is very important in counseling. And respect. Anyone? How do you think respect is an important quality that you need to have as a good listener? Person? Respect?
to make the person feel valued and accepted.
Exactly. Exactly. When you're paying attention to whatever that person is saying, and you're properly responding to anything that they're saying, you're having a fluid conversation with that person, it shows that you are respecting whatever is being said. You are respecting that person for his experience, for whatever issues he or she is going through. So you, as a counselor, you need to show the respect. You need to give due regards to the feelings and to the feelings of your client, and be able to show your client that you, as a counselor, you are respecting everything that they're saying. And integrity. Well, integrity, it's you are expected as a client, as sorry, as a counselor, to act in good faith, to be honest, and to be reliable. And sometimes, when you are assigned difficult cases where you may find yourself in situation where you are unable to properly counsel a client, so it's important for you, if you're unable to practice um, to practice the different skills required from you. So it's important for you to either refer the case to someone else, or to talk to your supervisor about this. So you have to act in good faith. And also, sometimes it's difficult when you are mostly if you are dealing with criminals, with rapists, or people who've different perpetrators, then it may be difficult for you to be to be honest with yourself, and not judge the people in front of you. But malheureusement, even if we are all human beings, and this is our normal way to react to certain situation, it is expected from us as a counselor, as a psychologist, or as a social worker, to put aside our personal values and beliefs, and try to help the person in front of us, because that person needs help. And our main duty is to provide guidance to that person, so that he or she can come out of any situation that they are in. So, integrity is, you have to act in good faith and be honest with yourself and uh, your client. Resilience is the ability to mentally or emotionally cope with a crisis and bounce back. Like I've told you, the work, being a counselor or a social worker, it requires a lot of efforts. Sometimes listening to people talking about problems from morning to afternoon, it is very difficult, because at the end of the day, you are a human being, and being surrounded by all these different problems, it becomes difficult for you as a person, as a human being, to let go sometimes of these problem, and be able to dissociate from whatever you've experienced throughout the day. So you have to, as a counselor, you have to practice resilience and be able to uh, cope with the demand of the work, and also take care of yourself, and know when you have to uh, stop with uh, stop being a counselor and start being the person that you are. And humility is, you have to be humble, and you have to to understand that not each and every person is perfect. A lot of, all of us, we have some, nous avons des défauts, and it doesn't mean that, as because you are a counselor, when your client is coming in for counseling, it means that you're superior to your client. You have to be humble, you have to give due respect to your client, and you have to treat each and every client in the same way, and be fair to each and every client. So ça rejoint point 7, which is fairness. It means that you have to be fair in your dealings, and treat each and every client in the same way. Wisdom, it's well, wisdom comes with experience. The more counseling sessions that you have, the more you will acquire the knowledge of how to conduct a good counseling session, what are the do's and the don'ts in a counseling session, in a certain situation, how you should be reacting. So wisdom, it comes with the experience, and it comes with dealing with different types of problem. And courage, like I've told you, sometimes it becomes difficult to constantly listen to people's problem, the different situation that they've been in, and mostly if you're working with victims of, for example, domestic violence, victims of rape, for example, it becomes difficult to sit with them and be able to understand their situation, their feelings, and put yourself in their shoes. So, as a counselor, as a social worker, and as a psychologist, you have to show great courage, and realize that you are a human being, and you have your limitation as well. So, you have to know how to work on yourself as well. Et quand il faut dire non, you have to say no. If you're unable to do something, you have to muster the courage and tell either your supervisor or your colleague that you are unable to do this, and request for them to take over. And competence, it's a mixture of the skills and knowledge that you need to have for the job, and you need to continuously upgrade and develop your knowledge and skills, and you need to be updated about the different research being carried out in your area of expertise. For example, social worker, or even in counseling, you have to look for the new research being done in counseling, the different counseling skills, the different issues being associated. For example, recently with COVID-19, there were a lot of people who've suffered from depression. So there have been a lot of research done on depression and COVID-19, the impact of COVID-19 on the increase of depression, on domestic violence, for example. So you have to keep yourself updated about the research being done in your area of expertise. So these are the different main qualities of a good listener. It is important, you have to know about these different main qualities, and you have more information on these in your manual. So please make it a must, you go and read about these different main qualities, because, well, it is important. So according to you, what are the barriers to listening? What prevents you from properly listening to, well, an individual or someone around you? Anyone?
Ma'am, I think maybe when your mind is somewhere else and you are present, but your mind is not there to listen.
Yes. So you're absent minded and you're daydreaming. This is a barrier to listening, yes. Anything else?
The environment.
Yes. Ensuite, anything else?
Maybe
Noise.
when someone is we think that what the person is saying is not what we want to listen, so we don't pay attention to that person.
Okay, yes.
Not prepared for the subject.
Okay, yes, this is good. Anything else? If you are given this question in the exam, what are the barriers to listening? What would you write?
I would say not emotionally ready to listen, to take care of a person.
Yes, this is good as well.
Madam, I think it sometimes it is the subject itself, himself or herself, impacts on the person who is listening. Um, from the background, from where he comes, the way he look, the way he behaves.
Okay, yes, this
Maybe if we
is
are not going to be able to listen carefully.
to that person.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is very good. Okay, so barriers to active listening. So being selective, like you've said, you only hear a part of the message, and but you do not listen to the whole message. And you're being selective in the content that is interesting to you, and the rest of the conversation, you do not pay attention to it. Being distracted. If you're talking to someone in the background, you see a person, yelling, or for instance, if you went out to buy flowers and you've met someone and you're talking to that person, and at the same time you see someone walking with a bunch of flower, and seeing the flower is you've been distracted by just seeing that flower, and you stop listening to that, to whatever the person is telling you. And being influenced by personal values and culture, and for example, not being objective, letting personal values, beliefs, or opinion influence the way we understand a client, like you've just said, the way a person is, the way if a person comes into counseling, and you let your personal belief, values, and opinion influence the way you perceive that person, it may act as a barrier to active listening and preparing for a response. So, if your client is talking about, let's just say, anxiety, and you've once had anxiety issues, so without actually listening to the person, you're projecting whatever you know, what anxiety is all about. So you do not pay much attention to whatever the client is telling you about. You are more interested in relating your own experience. So this may act as a barrier. Another important barrier is language. And I'm just going to tell you something personal. I have a colleague. She does not understand Bhojpuri, and she works in a region where most of the people they talk in Bhojpuri. So it was difficult for her to counsel these persons because she was unable to understand whatever they were telling her. There were some words which she was not able to understand. So this acted as a barrier to her giving the best of herself. And language is a very important, well, not it is one of the main barrier in active listening, because if you're unable to understand that person, you won't pay much attention, and it becomes difficult for you to understand whatever the client is telling you about. And sometimes being threatened by a client, this can act as a barrier to active listening as well, because uh, you would be more interested in formulating a safety plan in your head than listening to that person or whatever he or she is telling you about. So there are more barriers to active listening, and what you've told me, it's good, yes, because the different barriers you have for example, being tired, you're stressed about the situation, you've experienced some personal issues. So whenever you are a client has come in, you're more focused on your personal issues than listening to what the client is telling you about. So there are many barriers to active listening, but for the sake of this class, we've concentrated on what is in your manual. So again, you can go through the manual and read more about the barriers to listening, or you can even go online and Google and read more about the barriers to active listening. So there are different kind of listening, and the first one is verbal listening. So verbal listening involves the use of minimal verbal responses, and those responses will enable the client to feel that the counselor is paying attention to whatever is being said and encourages him to continue talking. Some example of verbal responses are mm-hmm, yes, I see. So whenever you are talking to someone, when a person they demonstrate these verbal responses, you will know that that person is actually listening to you, and you will feel more encouraged to open up or to talk more about a certain topic that you are discussing. So verbal responses is important because again, it shows that you're paying attention and that you're listening to whatever that person is telling you about. You have non-verbal listening as well. It has been defined as SOLERF. So usually in a counseling session, you have to maintain eye contact. When you are maintaining eye contact, you're showing your client that you are paying attention and you're not dozing off whenever whatever he or she is telling you about. So usually when you are in a counseling session, you have to squarely face the client and do not turn to the side. You have to use open posture. Do not cross your arms or legs, and you have to slightly lean towards the client and refrain from sitting back in the chair for longer. And like I've told you, eye contact is very important. You have to be relaxed and natural whenever you're listening or conducting a counseling session, and you have to look friendly and welcoming. If you go in to a counselor who the moment that you step in a counseling session, you see the counselor's face and he or she seems to be very angry and irritated about something, chances of you opening up is very pre-zero, because you won't open up to someone who seems to be irritated or angry. You will fear, you will have the crainte that, well, you will be hesitant to open up because you will feel that the person is angry. If I say something, maybe that person might become violent, or he or she will not pay attention to me. So looking friendly and welcoming is the key to start a good counseling session and to build on your counseling relationship. So now we'll go through the different types of listening. So you will see in your manual, you have a lot of information on the different types of listening. Please make it a must to go and read about these different types of listening, because usually you are given a question on the different types of listening in the exams. So you have, first of all, you have fake listening. Fake listening is when you are not listening to that person at all. You are just pretending that you are listening to the person. You will look at the person, you will maintain eye contact, but uh, you you are daydreaming, or you've switched off, and you do not pay any attention to whatever that person is telling you about. Partial listening is to listen like for 5 minutes and then you doze off, and then you listen to 5 minutes again. So you do not listen to the whole conversation. You doze off every now and then, and you pick up just a few words without actually listening to everything that is being said. Selective listening, usually it may happen in a counseling session that you use selective listening. It happens mostly when you have client coming in and telling you from A to Z everything about their life, and you are mostly interested about one certain aspect of their life. So when they're talking about everything, you do not listen to all of the blah 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 that they'll be telling you about. You just focus on the part that is more interesting to you, on the part that will help you to guide them to find solution to their problem. So this is selective listening, that is just use focus on the important parts of the conversation that is helpful for you, and you do not pay attention to the rest of the conversation. Projective listening, like I've told you, it's mostly that the listener, he or she absorbs the information in accordance to his or her own frame of reference. And usually, if you have been in a similar situation, uh, if your client is telling you about a certain situation and you've been in the same situation, you will have a tendency of projecting your own feelings, your own experience, and your own point of views in that conversation. So this is projective listening. That is, you do not listen to whatever your client is telling you about. You mostly focus on your own experience, and you listen to everything that is being said by making reference to your own experience, your own opinions, and your own frame of reference. Filtered listening, on the other hand, it's when you let your personal, your different social and cultural bias, your point of views, your prejudice, the different experience that you've had, you let all of this prevent you from totally listening to your client. For example, if someone comes into counseling and he or she wants to talk about abortion, and you are against abortion, so you will try to find each and every argument, not to pay attention to every positive, to everything that your client is telling you about. So you let your own judgment, your own prejudice, and your own experience affect your listening and the conversation that you're having with your client. Total listening, on the other hand, is focusing on the whole conversation, listening to each and every single word that is being said. There are feedbacks in this conversation. There is a free conversation between you and your client when there is a total listening, and your client will feel respected your client will feel encouraged to further open up about any situation when you are practicing total listening. So these are the different types of listening. Like I've told you in your manual, you have the information, more information on these different types of listening. So please make it a must. Go and read about this and prepare more notes on the different types of listening. Now, if you go online, you will find that there are more than these six different types of listening. For your sake, and for you not to go and work on more different types of listening, please restrict yourself for just say these different types of listening. And if you're making notes, focus on the types of listening given to you here. Okay. So, do you have any question pertaining to listening? Any question?
Madame,
Oui.
oui, filtered listening, c'est un peu
I,
pareil comme
I, I, I
selective
can't-
listening.
Pardon?
C'est, c'est comme selective listening.
No, selective listening is you listen to a certain part of the conversation, the part which is more interesting to you, the part which will help you guide your client. Filtered listening, on the other hand, is letting your own judgment, your prejudice, your social and cultural biases affect the way that you listen to your client. Like the example that I've taken, if you are against abortion and your client is telling you the why he or she is not against abortion, you will not listen to your client because you already have a certain judgment, you already have a certain opinion about the topic, and you will let your opinion and your judgment about this topic affect your listening. So whatever positive points they'll be giving you, you won't pay attention to it because in your head, you've already decided that you are against abortion. And as a counselor, you should put aside your personal beliefs, your biases, and your prejudice. And when your client comes in front of you, you should listen to everything that your client is telling you about. And one important thing with being a counselor is that if your client comes in and they start telling you things which you're totally against, you should not touch their beliefs. You should not be telling them that if you are for abortion and I am against abortion, I will not listen to you. You should listen to them, pay attention to whatever it is they are saying, and guide them accordingly without letting your personal beliefs, values, and biases affect the way that you counsel someone. Have I answered your question? C'est plus clair maintenant?
Yes,
The difference between selective and
Oui.
filtered listening?
Un peu,
Pardon?
euh, ça porte confusion. Parce que si je choisis ce que je veux écouter,
Non,
comme
ouais,
l'exemple que
selective,
vous avez pris, comme abortion,
oui.
je choose not to listen to her.
No, selective listening, like I've told you, it's when there's a lot of thing being discussed in the counseling session, you are not totally listening to the client. You just pick up the part which is interesting to you.
Okay.
Filtered listening, however, is letting your personal belief affect your listening. Just because he or she is not on the same line, you will not listen to them. You are not choosing which part of the conversation that you will be listening to. You are just not listening to the person because you've let your personal beliefs and judgment affect that listening process.
Ok,
You
d'accord.
understood?
Oui, oui, c'est bon, merci.
Okay. Any more questions? Anyone? Do you have any question? Vous n'avez pas de questions? Okay, so
No question.
okay, so if you don't have question, then uh, we will start with the other topic. Just give me 1 minute, please. Okay, so can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, yes, Maran.
Okay. So the conversation. What is a conversation? A conversation is a talk, especially an informal one, between two or more people in which news and ideas are exchanged. So, a conversation is very important in counseling because you will be able to conduct a counseling session when there is an ongoing conversation between you and your client. So, when you start with a counseling session, the greeting is very important. When you are greeting your client, you have to ensure that you're friendly, you show adequate level of concern, you show warmth, you ensure that there is privacy. That is usually a counseling session. It's done in a room, a setting where it's only you and your client. You don't have 10 or 13 people around listening to whatever you're saying. So you have to ensure privacy when you're conducting a counseling session. You have to maintain eye contact. It's very important because you're showing to your client that you are paying attention to them and you are listening to whatever they are telling you about. You have to have an open gesture, that is, you do not cross your arms or legs. You slightly lean towards your client, again, to show that you are engaging in the conversation and you are physically and mentally present to listen to them. And usually, some counselor they use first names instead of saying Mr. X or Mrs. Z. They will tell you to ensure that there is a good counseling relationship between you and your client. You may ask your client to call you by your first name, and usually in in European countries or in America, the counselor, they usually shake hands with their counseling when they are meeting them for the first time or the second or third time. But in some countries, touching is not viewed appropriately. So whenever a client comes in, if you have to be very careful with touching. Some people, they are not at ease with a handshake or you touching their arms or guiding them, for example, to their seats. So you have touching is very well, c'est très sensible, and you have to be very careful when you are using touch. So if you are giving a handshake or touching the arm of your client, you have to ensure that your client is à l'aise with the touching before you practice same. So the greeting is very important. If you practice a good greeting, then your client will trust you. And again, the moment you have this trust element present in your counseling relationship, they will be able to further open up, and this will help you to conduct a good counseling session. So the seating arrangements in a counseling session, usually you need to have two identical chairs. And when your client comes in, you will ask your client to choose where they want to sit, and let them choose their seat, and then you go and sit on the next chair. So it is important that the chair are at a 45-degree angle, and you need to have an appropriate distance between you and your client, because you need to respect the personal space. And there shouldn't be any barriers between you and your client. There shouldn't be any table or desk. And like I've told you, you ask your client to choose his or her own seat. And usually, as a counselor, it is you should, whenever you are arranging a room for counseling session, you have to always think of a safety plan, because whenever you are counseling an individual, mostly if you are counseling individual with anger issues or criminals, for instance, you have to always put yourself you put your you arrange the counseling session in a way that you may if ever a situation arises where your client becomes violent, you can easily go out or seek help. So you should put your safety first and try as if you can, sit near the door where you can easily exit the room if ever your client becomes violent. So yes, it is important to think about your client, but in such situation, you have to put your safety first. And setting ground rules. Normally in counseling session, you have to set boundaries, and boundaries, they are set through contracts. So whenever during your first session with a client, you have to talk to your client, explain to your client what counseling is all about, help them understand that you are not here to provide a solution to their problem, because we do not give ready-made solutions to client. We are here to help the client, to guide the client so that the client can find his or her own solution. And usually in a counseling session, when before beginning with the session, you have to have a counseling contract where you talk about different points that your client has to respect. An example of counseling contract. So can you see the counseling contract on the screen? Vous arrivez à voir the counseling contract?
Oui, oui.
Okay, so this is an example of counseling contract. So the first point highlighted here is confidentiality. Usually in a counseling session, whatever is being discussed in the counseling session has to remain confidential. So you have to explain to your client in the first session that there is the element of confidentiality. That is, par exemple, ici, everything we discuss in our session together is confidential, except for the purpose of supervision, or where, in my opinion, there may be a danger to yourself or to others. So, usually, you have to maintain confidentiality throughout your counseling session. But if you think that your client might be a danger to himself or herself, then you have the right to break confidentiality. But you have to explain to your client about confidentiality and breach of confidentiality, that is, in which circumstances or you will be called upon to break confidentiality. Your client has to know that if ever you've broken confidentiality, what are the reason behind this? For example, if your client tells you that I I do not feel well, and I think that I want to, for example, I want to commit suicide. As a counselor, knowing that your client is depressive, your client has told you that they might commit suicide. So, as a counselor, it's your duty to report same to the concerned authorities, and it is your duty to save your client and to save his or her life. So if you are given such information, or for example, if your client, if you have someone with anger issues coming in for counseling and they tell you that if my wife keeps on screaming at me, I will murder her. Or they tell you that tonight I think that uh, I will I might beat my wife. So, as a counselor, if you are given this information, it is your duty to report same and to report same to the concerned authorities, in this case, the police, so that the police can intervene and deal with such situation. So, it is important for you to make your client understand that yes, there is confidentiality in the counseling session, and whatever is being discussed will remain confidential, except when I feel that you may be a danger to yourself or to society. So it is important that your client understand in which circumstances you may breach confidentiality. So another important important um, point that you need to mention in the counseling agreement is about the length of the session. For example, if your counseling session will last for 10 to 15 sessions, your client has to know about it so that he or she can prepare himself or herself for 10 to 15 sessions. And if the session is 60 minutes long, so you have to tell your client that each session will be 60 minutes long. So if we are having a session each week, so you have to prepare yourself for at least 1 hour of counseling each week. And you also have to talk about the fees, because your client has to know about has to know how much he or she has to pay you for each session. So it is important that you include the fees in the counseling agreement. And you may talk about cancellation, that is, in which circumstances, if ever the client needs to cancel a session, what needs to be done. And you also have to talk about the boundaries. For example, your client cannot come in with a gift. You are not allowed as a counselor to accept gift from your client. It is not ethical. and your client has to know how to behave during a counseling session. They shouldn't come in a counseling session drunk or dressed in a bikini or swimwear or things like this. So it is important for you to talk about the limits for counseling and set the different boundaries. So this is an example of a counseling contract, and you need to read the contract in the first session. You read the contract, you explain the different clause of the contract to your client, and make sure that they understand each and every part of the contract, and then you make them sign the contract. You keep a copy for yourself and you give a copy to your client. So according to you, why do you think we need to have a counseling contract?
It can be as a
Anyone? Pardon?
it can be as a proof if there is any issue afterwards.
Exactly. So, if usually in a counseling contract, you can also talk about complaint procedures. That is, sometimes people come into counseling thinking that you will provide solution to their problem. They do not realize that when they come into counseling, we are here to guide them so that they can find a solution to their problem. We help empower, well, we try to empower them as much as possible. And if they do not find a solution to their problem, they will blame you for not being comment dire, not being professional enough and for not having solved or provided any solution to their problem. And they might go ahead and register a complaint against you. So if you've given a counseling contract where they've signed and you've explained about the different clauses of counseling, you've explained what the counseling is all about, or par exemple, if there was a situation where you had to breach confidentiality and your client goes to an institution and complains about it that you did not respect confidentiality, so you will have the paper signed by your client where he or she has signed, and this is an under well they've under you've read all the different clause in the counseling contract, you've explained, and it's written down that I am well aware in which circumstances confidentiality can be breached, and I've understood each and every point discussed in the counseling contract. Then, if you have this signed, then even if they go and complain, register a complaint against you that you've breached confidentiality and you're able to explain yourself, you would not have any issues or have your license cancelled. So counseling contract is very important. It will ça va vous protéger as a counselor, and even it will make your client feel safe in the sense that you've signed a counseling contract. So tomorrow, if there's any issue, they may use this contract. And even for you, tomorrow, if there's any issue pertaining to your client, you may use this contract as a proof that your client has understood, they've read, understood, and signed the contract. So ensure that if ever you're conducting a counseling session, ensure that usually in government institution you do not have any counseling contract, but in private practice you have counseling contract. So you have to ensure that if ever you are practicing as a counselor in a private setting, so you have to ensure that you have this contract for your own safety and well pour vous, pour assurer que if ever there's any situation, you can use this contract to help yourself, to take yourself out of any situation where there's a complaint or anything registered against you. So boundaries, like I've told you, it's important. You have to set the time for the session. Si c'est de 10h à 11h and your client came in at disons 10:30, then they should have respected the 1 hour session. So if they are late and they've come in at 10:30 instead of 10 o'clock, they will be given only 30 minutes. Well, the counseling session will last only 30 minutes instead of 1 hour, because they should have respected the time assigned to them. And you have to take into consideration any constraint that your client might be facing. And Edgar divided the counseling session into three parts. You have the beginning, where the greeting, setting down, seating arrangement, boundaries, and constraint are discussed. You have the middle part, where the client open up about the situation that they are facing. There's an understanding of the nature of the problem being discussed. And you have the end, where you reflect on implementation of decision taken. You offer guidance and support as deemed appropriate, and inform if there will be more sessions or not. So these are the three parts of a counseling session. So, like I've told you, the contract, these are some different elements which can be included in the contract. So, address confidentiality, breach of confidentiality, we've already discussed about this. You have the time and length of a session, that is, if it's 1 hour, 1 hour, 30 minutes, or 45 minutes, but you have to ensure that all your client are assigned the same amount of time, and one client cannot be given a counseling session of 2 hours and the other client only 1 hour. So you have to respect the length of session for each client. The number of session may vary depending on the situation or the problem that your client claiming to counseling for. And the fees is important. You have to discuss the fees before starting the counseling session. Boundaries, like I've told you, your client cannot come into counseling under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and they have to know how to properly conduct themselves. And cancellation, if ever you need to cancel a session, or if your client needs to cancel a session, there are a certain way. Maybe they can contact you 24 hours before, and then you can set another date. Or if they did not inform you, then you will charge them the same amount that you should have charged them if they were present. So you have to mention all of this in the contract. And you have limits for counseling. For example, you have different types of counselor. You have some counselors who specialized in family matters. You have others in domestic violence. You have others in cases of, disons, in the educational settings, for example. So you have to talk about the limits. If you are unable to counsel someone with, let's just say that someone facing problems at school pertaining to their academic performance, then you have to talk about your limits, because if your expertise is in family matters, you won't be able to counsel someone with having performance issues at school. So you have to talk about your area of expertise and in which area you can better focus on to help the client. And ending is very important. Sometimes you have client who becomes dependent on you, and they do not wish to end the counseling session. So it is important that you talk to your client and tell them that we will have a maximum of 10 sessions. And at the end of each session that you have to constantly remind them that this is our third session. So we have 7 more sessions remaining. And you constantly remind them that there will be an ending to the counseling relationship, to the counseling session, and that you have to prepare your client for same. And referral options, if you are unable to help your client, to guide your client, because it's not your area of expertise, and if you feel that your personal beliefs or judgment is interfering with your ability to properly counsel your client, then you can refer your client to someone, to another professional. And it is important for you to talk about all of this with your client to help them understand the reason why you are referring them to someone else. Another example is if someone comes into counseling and they tell you that uh, they have a dependency on alcohol, you may refer them to the hospital. So it is important for you to talk about the different referral options that you have, be it to the hospital, to a psychiatric, to a psychologist, or a doctor, or Maurice, you have, par exemple, if you have someone came into counseling and for, par exemple, marital issues, and they're talking, if the husband came into counseling and he's talking about how his wife neglects their child, and she does not take care of the child, etc., then you may refer the case to child protection services, where the officers may intervene for the welfare of the child. So you have to talk, you have to explain your client about the different referral options that you may use, and explain to them why and in which circumstances you will use these referral options. And you have complaint procedures. Complaint procedures, you have to explain to your client that if he or she is not satisfied with the services being offered, he or she may go to a certain institution to register a complaint about the way the counseling session is well, the way that you're conducting a counseling session, or if there's anything that they are against and they wish to register a complaint. So you have to explain about the complaint procedures as well, and in which circumstances they may go and register a complaint. So a contract is very important. The different elements in the contract, they are very important, and you have to be able, if you may be given a question in the exam where you are asked to elaborate on the importance of having these different elements present in the contract. And so you should be able to explain about these different elements, explain the reason why they should be included in a counseling contract. Okay? Are you still here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So note down the different elements in contract is very important. We may be given a question on the different elements in contract for the exams. So make it a must that you go and read about this. And I will post the different contracts, three different contracts, example of three different contracts on a Blackboard. So you may have a look and read more about the different elements. Okay. So managing boundaries, like we've talked about, confidentiality is very important. We need to ensure that confidentiality is maintained throughout the counseling session, but in special circumstances, confidentiality may be broken if you feel that your client is a danger to himself or to society. But you need to help your client to understand that whatever is being discussed in a counseling session will remain between you and your client, except certain situations where confidentiality can be broken. And distinction between relationship, it is important that your client realizes that your relationship with him or her is a professional relationship. It's a counseling relationship. And it's not a friendship, it's not a love relationship. You are doing your work as a counselor. Yes, there are certain situations where your client may become dependent on you, or in some situation where your client will feel so happy that you've been able to guide them that they'll start developing certain feelings for you. But you have to be very clear since the very first session that whatever relationship there will be between you and your client, it has to remain professional, and there won't be any blurring of lines. And if your client, for example, if your client uh, proposes, uh, well, they tell you, let's go out for coffee or for tea, you should you accept a proposal to go out for coffee or for tea?
No.
No.
Exactly. You shouldn't be accepting any gift, any favors, nothing from your client, and you have to ensure that the relationship remains professional. And boundaries, if you've set boundaries in the very first session, it will help create a trust, honest and safe environment, which will encourage your client to further open up. So now, when your client is talking to you, when they are elaborating on any situation that they are facing, it is important for you to pick up signals from your client to know how interactive he or she should be. For example, if you're talking about, if you have someone who came in to report marital conflict, for example, when talking about communication, you'll see that they have a very sad look on their face, or they cringe whenever you talk about any communication between between your client and his or her partner. So the moment you see this signal, you have to this for example, facial expression, you have to realize that this may be a topic of interest where you should be further digging in to be able to extract as much information as possible to help your client. So you will see whenever you're talking to someone or you're counseling someone, it is important for you to observe their facial expression, their body posture, the way that they react to certain words, to certain sentences, and their behavior en general. And from this, you will be able to pick up on which topic you should be further concentrating on and which topic you should be further extracting information from, so that you can further help your client. And you have to also encourage your client with verbal and non-verbal cues. For example, like we've discussed, if your client is talking and talking, so you can just say, okay, I see. So can you please elaborate more on this? So what is it that is bothering you about this situation? So you have to show your client that you are paying attention and that you are listening to them. And non-verbal warmth, it's like nodding your head, maintaining eye contact, and smiling at them, showing a friendly expression, so that they can further open up and realize that you are here, you are not judging them, you are paying attention to whatever they are saying. And there's the most importantly, there's no judgment on your face. So this will encourage your client to further open up. And probing question, like I've told you, so you can ask them. So you've talked about being angry with your partner, so can you please elaborate more? In which circumstances do you feel that you become aggressive towards your partner? Is it when he or she screams at you? So you have to continuously probe for information, use probing question to gather as much information as possible. And usually at the end of a session, you have to sum up the whole session, uh, and so that your client realizes the progress that you've made. And by summing up, you will also help the client understand the different issues which have been discussed, and the different guidance offered to the client in the session. But if you feel that during a session your client was very disturbed, emotionally very disturbed, then you may not focus on the part which has caused this disturbance. You can just focus on the positive part of the session where you've been able to achieve something. So, summing up at the end of a session is very important because it helps your client think about everything which has been discussed, and by focusing on the positive point you will help your client to gain more confidence and be more encouraged about further opening up and about the other sessions, the upcoming sessions. So respect, empathy, and genuineness is very important in a counseling session. If you give your client due respect, you show empathy, and you are genuine in your dealing, your client will definitely open up about the situation that they're facing, and you will be able to gather as much information as possible to help you do a good job as a counselor and properly guide your client the way that they should be guided. So, respect, empathy, and genuineness are three main skills that you need to have as a counselor. So, the conversation. Usually, the counseling session is all about the different, the ongoing conversation happening between you and your client. So, the conversation in your manual is divided into three parts. You have first part is encouraging exploration. Stage two is deeper understanding, and stage three is action and ending. So, in stage one, encouraging exploration, again, you have to show empathy to show your client that you are understanding their point of view, you are understanding whatever is being said, and verbal communication is important. You have to give your full attention, you have to practice active and total listening, and you shouldn't be distracted by any internal conversation or any external factor around you, and you should use verbal and non-verbal encouragement to help your client to further open up. And you have to pick on emotion, like we've talked about. Um, Reflective experience here is divided to three types. So you have reflecting facts and thoughts. So you can pick up on 3 to 6 words and then find a moment in the conversation and list down the phase of word. You have an example here. This so if you, for example, if you're talking about let's just say your client came in into the session, and they've been telling you about a recent panic attack that they've had, and they tell you that uh, when they met person X, they were reminded about an event where they felt very humiliated, and at that moment, the panic attack started again. So you can pick up on the keywords, that is, when you met X person, humiliating situation. Which humiliating situation are you talking about? What happened in that situation? So by picking up on the main elements, you will be able to help your client again to further open up and gather more information. And reflecting on feelings, so you pick up on emotions and reflect back to help the client elaborate more. You have an example here. The client tells you, I was so angry and frustrated that I did not know how to react, whether to cry or to scream at them. And you, as a counselor, you can ask, so you were angry or frustrated? And they may tell you, I was both angry and frustrated because blah, 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 blah. So this will help help you to again gather more information. And reflecting observation is to reflect on the facial expression or body language. Example, a client tells you that he's fine not having obtained a promotion at work, but he's clenching his fist. The counselor can then say, are you talking about the promotion? As you were talking about the promotion, you look angry and frustrated. So, what can you tell me more about this? So, this is a way where you reflect on different parts of the conversation and be it on facts or thoughts, feelings, or the different observations that you've made, and put it all together to help your client to further reflect on these different parts of the conversation and open up about anything which they might be hiding from you. So the reflecting part is very important, and it is not. You shouldn't. These are well. The reflecting part. It's something that you can practice in your day-to-day life. It doesn't. You don't have to limit this only to counseling. When you're having a normal conversation with someone, be it your partner, your children, your husband, your colleagues, even your family, you may use this reflecting experiences, that is, you reflect on facts and thoughts, feelings, and observation, and see how you can further engage in a conversation, and in some circumstances, guide the people to whom you're having a conversation with in better understanding certain situations. So this is something which you can use in your day-to-day life as well. And you have paraphrasing and summarizing. Paraphrasing is when you take a small part of what someone has said and reflect it back in your own words. Summarizing, on the other hand, is generally comes after hearing more, and when you pick up on key things that has been said, and you properly use the speaker's own word to summarize the whole thing. So paraphrasing and summarizing, again, it will help you to encourage your client to reflect on whatever has been discussed, and your client can, when hearing this what they've said in a different word, can help them reflect on this and further try to well rearrange their thoughts and open up about certain situation. So, as you may have noticed, our main aim in counseling is to use different skills to encourage our client to further open up. This is one of the main goal, like, if I might say, of counseling, is to use the different skills that we've discussed to help our client to open up, and for us to gather more information to help the client in turn. So another thing that you can do in counseling is clarifying and filling the gaps and probing. So an example here is your client tells you that I was disappointed. So you as a counselor, you may say by what or who, and they tell you by people. And again, you to be able to gather more information, you can ask which people in particular, when or how. Sometimes in counseling, you may have people coming in and telling you that they'll come in the first session and tell you, I have a problem. That's it. They won't elaborate on what problem. Is it a family problem, a marital problem, a problem with your colleagues, your friend? They won't open. They'll just tell you, I have a problem. And then you have to be the one to probe and try to clarify and fill in the gaps that in the different things that they tell you, to be able to better understand what the problem is all about and how you can help them. So in counseling, you have different types of client coming in, and you have client who may tell you every single thing about their life, be it from they were a child to now when they're an adult, there are some information which are totally irrelevant to whatever they've come into counseling for, but they will, because they want to talk, they will tell you just everything. And you also have clients who are more hesitant and they do not wish to open up, and then they will just tell you one or two words. Then it becomes your responsibility to try to help them further open up. And these are ways in which you can help them to further open up and gather more information. And probing and interrupting. An example of probing is here it's the counselor telling a client that you mentioned you were disappointed. Could you please tell me more about that? An example of interrupting is when the counselor may tell a client that you seem to have a lot to say, but I want to be sure that I have followed your issues so far. Can I tell you what I have heard till now? So this example, you would use this in a situation where your client has been telling you everything from A to Z, and you have been bombarded with so much information that you have to quelque part recanaliser your client to be able to understand which problem exactly they've come into counseling for. So this is the life of a counselor, where you have to, sometimes you have client telling you more than you need to listen to, and sometimes you have client not telling you anything about the situation that they've been in. Another important part of counseling is silence. Sometimes when discussing about a certain situation which is very sensitive, you may find yourself in a situation where there is 5 to 10 minutes of silence, where the client and the counselor, they both are reflecting on whatever have been said. And sometimes a silence can be an indication of uneasiness. That is, the client is not comfortable in further opening up about the situation. And sometimes the silence can give you an indication about how you should redirect your counseling session and which aspect you should be further concentrating on. An example that I may give you in which silence can be used is when you are discussing with a rape, someone who's been victim of a rape. And when they are talking about the circumstances, how it happened, you may find your client in certain, during the conversation, taking longer pauses where they won't be able to further elaborate on what happened, because for them, they will be going through that, experiencing that situation all over again when they'll be discussing about it. So then you will be able to see how uncomfortable your client is. But unfortunately, as a counselor, when you see that your client is not being able to open up, there are situations where you'll have to further probe your client to be able to help them. Even if you are uncomfortable and you feel that your client is uncomfortable, in certain situations, you have to constantly probe so that you can find certain ways to help them. Or if you have to send a report or to the court or to the police station about the information that you've obtained from the victim, then it may become it can be an uncomfortable situation for both you and your client, but you will be asked to further probe to be able to get as much information as possible, which will help you, your client, and a third party to better understand the situation. So silence is an important part of counseling, but you have to know how to make good use of that moment. And question, you may ask several questions throughout the counseling session. There may be open-ended question, close-ended question. Usually when you are ending a session, you would not at the end of a session ask an open-ended question, because it will pave the way for more information. And at the end of the session, you don't want to end a conversation with an open-ended question. So stage 2, a deeper understanding. It's the most crucial and determining stage, where there will be deeper level of empathy during the stage 2, and this deeper level of empathy will lead to more trust and disclosure from client. And usually, if you've created a good counseling relationship with your client in in stage 1, then it will be easier for your client to open up about any situation that they might be facing. And when you're talking to your client, you have to recognize the patterns and the frame of the conversation. And you should be able to establish a link between the different themes which have cropped up during the conversation and in the client's story. And this will help you to further guide your client. And the language, the metaphor, and the imagery used during the conversation is important. Like, for example, if your client tells you that I feel like a river which is flowing fast and out of control, so you have to be able to understand to just what your client is trying to tell you through this metaphor. A river which is flowing fast and out of control doesn't mean that you're not being able to control your emotion, or does it mean that you are being overwhelmed with the situation that you're in. So in this case, you may engage in the conversation by saying, is the river floating? Is it filled with dirt, or is it clear and transparent? So through this metaphor, you may better understand your client and his or her state of mind. And sometimes with imageries or the different language that they've used, it can also help you. Immediacy is the capacity of a counselor to make use of the immediate situation and encourage a client to ponder on what is happening between them. It can be risky and unfamiliar, but it is one of the most powerful tools in counseling. Immediacy, it is used when you feel that there is a situation where your client has given you the chance to open up about something which you've been hesitant, well, to not open up, to focus on something which you've been hesitant in asking your client about. And if you can tackle the situation immediately, it will help you to guide your client and to tackle a situation which you were unable to tackle before. So if par exemple, if you wanted to ask your client about his or her feeling about a situation that they've been through, and you were hesitant, thinking that your client may be disturbed after such a conversation, and if your client has during the conversation talked about this situation, then you can immediately make use of it to ask them about their feelings, or what they think about this situation. So immediacy is a powerful tool, but you have to know how and when to use it. Specific and concrete, it's mostly how to to help your client to have an insight of the issues that you've been talking about. Thinking and pattern beliefs, like I've told you, you have to pay attention to whatever your client is telling you about. And usually you are not allowed as a counselor to touch the belief of your client. You have to respect your client, and if ever they have an irrational belief about something, you may try to help them, guide them to understand that belief their belief is irrational, but you shouldn't straightforwardly tell them that whatever you're thinking, it's absurd, it's total nonsense. This is not a way that you should conduct a counseling session. You have to make your client realize by themselves that the belief that they've been harboring is irrational. And stage 3, actions and ending. So at the end of each counseling session, you have to make an assessment of the progress that you've made so far. And you have to also help your client to understand about the positive sides of the counseling session, how it has benefited them throughout the different sessions that they've come in, the different sessions that they've attended. And usually by just summarizing or clarifying things with your client, it will help them to offload their mind and to feel better about themselves. And like I've told you, as a counselor, you are not here to solve, to provide ready-made solution to solve the problem of your client. You should mostly guide your clients so that they can come up with their own problem-solving techniques. And if tomorrow they are in a similar situation, they will be able to come out of the situation without the help of anyone. And sometimes when you are ending a conversation or a counseling session, it may be difficult in the sense that your client feels that they are not ready for the counseling to end. But you, as a counselor, you know that your client has been equipped with the necessary skills and they won't need further counseling. So it becomes your responsibility as a counselor to know how to properly empower your client and make them realize about make them realize that they no longer need counseling and that they can tackle the issue on their own now. So managing the ending of the conversation, so both the counselor and the client must be at ease with any decision taken during the counseling, and it must be clear about what the counselor is offering. The counselor must ensure that he does not make any promises that he cannot deliver. And the client must be aware of the nature and the duration of the session. And like we've talked about in the beginning, setting a time, it's important for you as a counselor to be clear about time available for a client. If you've told the client that the session will be from 10 to 11 a.m. and the client comes in at 10:30, they will be provided with only 30 minutes of session and not more than 30 minutes, because it was their responsibility to come for the session at 10 a.m. and they didn't inform you about any lateness. So they won't be given the 1 hour session. It will just be 30 minutes. And if you feel that your client is talking, well, if this session is running longer than planned, then you should, as a counselor, know how to end the session during the time frame that has been assigned to your client. And if you are scheduling another appointment, you have to inform your client about the date and the time for the next session. And like I've told you, you shouldn't be using open-ended question at the end of the session. Instead, you should summarize all the good things which have happened during the counseling session. And if ever there's a new matter which has been brought up in the counseling at the end of the session, then you may reassure your client that you will discuss about this topic in the next session when you'll be meeting. And planned ending, usually it happens at the end of the counseling relationship, when you've told your client that after 10 session, we won't be having any more sessions. So at the end of each session, you should be telling your client that we have only 5 sessions remaining, 4 sessions remaining, 3 or 1. And you have to constantly remind your client that there is an ending to the session. And anyhow, you won't be able to continuously come for counseling. So there are 2 ways of ending the last session. You have a phased ending, where planned sessions are scheduled through well, you may have a session of 1 hour, and then you may have at the end session of 30 minutes, just to well, you just so that it is not an come on, you are not ending the session abruptly. So from 1 hour, you may shorten the session to 30 minutes, so that you can just discuss the last few things that needs to be discussed during the counseling. And you have immediate ending. Immediate ending usually happens when you feel that your client is ready to go out and ready to face any situation, and you just tell your client that I feel that you're now ready, you have been equipped with the necessary skills, and you will be able to find a solution to your own problem, and I don't think that you need any more sessions. So this is our last session, and well, good luck, and I hope that you'll be able to well, if ever you're faced with any situation, you will be able to well, to deal with the situation and find a solution to any problem that you may be having. So by doing an immediate ending, sometimes it can bring out a sense of confidence in your client, so that they know that they will be able to face the situation, and they will be able to find a solution to any problem that they may face. And sometimes you have difficult endings as well, where you have client not willing to end a counseling session. And sometimes if you feel that your client is developing certain feelings for you, and if you feel that your client is developing certain feelings for you, and it's becoming more than just a professional relationship, then you will have to end the counseling relationship and the counseling session. But it may be difficult for you to make your client understand the reason why you are ending the session, so they may become emotionally upset. Or sometimes when you are ending one session and your client has asked you about something, or you've discussed about something which has made your client emotional, so it can be difficult for you to end that session in 2 to 3 minutes. And sometimes you may have client telling you after 3 or 4 sessions that they no longer wish to come for the session, and they feel better. So you haven't been able to properly guide them or to conduct the session as you should have. But the client, they if they tell you that they no longer want to attend the session, you have to respect their wishes. And sometimes when there are breaks taken by the counselor or the client, it becomes difficult to properly conduct the session and end the session as well. And for the unexpected ending, sometimes it usually happens in couple counseling, where you have when you are conducting a counseling, it is important that both parties, if it's a couple counseling or a family counseling, uh, all the different parties involved, they have to agree for the counseling, because when you are conducting a counseling, you will be guiding these people, and these people would be the one making efforts to make their relationship work. If one person is not agreeable for counseling, the counseling session will not be as fruitful as expected. So sometimes if during the counseling one people says, if one person tell you that I don't want to go forward with the counseling and I don't think that it will help me, so you will have to unexpectedly end the counseling session, and it may not benefit your client, but since they've told you that they do not wish for more counseling session, you have to respect their wishes. So this is about ending, and then evaluation. At the end of each counseling session, you have to make an evaluation. It is a crucial step in the conversation process. It helps the client to have an overview and recognize the progress made, and it helps the counselor to improve his or her practice as well, because they will ask for feedback. And you some counselors, they may have a questionnaire, a feedback questionnaire, uh, which they give to clients to fill in, to ask about anything where which has been in which the counselor has not been able to provide as much help as possible, and how should the counselor improve, etc. But one of the most important thing to do at the end of a counseling session to help a client is to have a conversation, summarize all the good things which has happened in the counseling session and the different progress made by the client throughout each counseling session. So I know it's a lot to take in, but have you been able to understand a bit how a counseling session uh, is conducted?
Yes, ma'am.
I will post two videos on Blackboard. If I'm not being able to post on Blackboard, I will send the class rep. Do you have do you have a common email address? Do you guys have a common email address? Which everyone has access to? That is, all students have access to?
No, no, we don't.
Okay, so I will post on Blackboard. If there's any issue, then I will contact the class rep and we'll see how we can share the links. It will be two videos on good counseling and bad counseling. So please make it a must before our next class. You go through these videos, and then we'll discuss about what are the do's and the don'ts in counseling, how we can how we can conduct a good counseling session, what is expected from a counselor, what is expected from a client in a counseling session, and then we can further discuss about how a counseling session has to be conducted. And I also have to send you your assignment. So I will post the assignment maybe by next week, and then I will have a brief session with you guys so that we can discuss about the assignment, and so that I can guide you on how you should be answering the assignment question and what is expected from you in the assignment. So maybe by latest Wednesday next week, I will I will post your assignment question, and then you discuss among yourself a day and a time when you are free. It won't be a long session, maybe just 30 minutes maximum. We'll just discuss about the assignment and what is expected from you in the assignment. Okay? So
Yes,
do you guys
ma'am.
have any question?
No.
So, well, please make it a must and go and read about the two topics covered today. And if there's anything that is not clear, we can always discuss about same in the next session. Or if there's something urgent, you can always send me an email. We can discuss about same. And like I've told you, I will post the assignment and then decide amongst yourself a day when you will be free. Then we can have a brief session about the assignment question. Do everyone in this group, do you all have contact with the class rep?
Yes.
Okay, so it will be easier if I'll just if there's anything, then I can send you either by mail or by message. So if you don't have any question, we'll end the session. Thank you again for your time, and thank you again for today. And
Thank you, madam.
you're most welcome. So maybe by next week or the week after, we'll have another session, and then we'll discuss. Okay? Hello, bonne nuit. And I hope it was interesting. And please make it a must to watch the videos that I'll be posting soon. Okay? And bye bye.
Okay, madam. Okay, bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.